Well, hello, good morning. Welcome back to the Alaska SeaLife Center for another of our virtual visits. My name's Alex, and I'm back again. It's a new year, right? 2022. This is our first virtual visit of the new year. So we're going to play a little bit of catch up, but before we do that, let's thank our sponsors for these programs. So this season has been made available free to the public thanks to a contribution from Royal Caribbean Group. So we're really thankful because we love bringing this to the public, and they've made it so that we can just do it for free for y'all and make sure that everyone out there can come visit the SeaLife Center virtually. So as I mentioned, it is a new year. We've had a couple weeks off on our virtual visits here. We're glad to see people are tuning in for this first one of 2022. Go ahead and type in that chat where you're watching from or any questions you might have through the program. And as always, while we're live, you can also text. We put that number down in the description while we're live. And feel free to text us any questions if you can't get them in the chat. But we would love to take those throughout the program. Now, for today's program, we are going to be taking a look at this exhibit behind me. And this is actually the Harbor Bottom exhibit. But it kind of ties into something that happened last weekend here in Seward. Let's take a look at the sunrise while I talk about this, just to give you kind of an idea, just to set the mood here a bit. At the beginning of each year, folks in Seward, and actually from elsewhere in Alaska, they travel to Seward to jump into our boat harbor here. Kind of late morning, and so as you can see from the sunrise, it's not exactly warm weather, so that's why they call this the Polar Bear Plunge. And people just go on out there. It's actually a fundraiser. They raise money. They take signatures from people, and then when they jump in, they're basically raising money towards cancer research. And so this has been pretty fun to see every year, and it did happen again this year. But as you can see, that water's pretty cold. As we've talked about before, it's about 40 degrees or so Fahrenheit here in Resurrection Bay. But speaking of that boat harbor that they jump into, the exhibit behind us is actually called Harbor Bottom, and it's supposed to kind of simulate what a boat harbor, underwater would look like. And this is one of the first exhibits that you actually get to. So just to kind of intro this, when you come to the SeaLife Center, the small boat harbor is kind of the setting. When you first get here, we've got like the Seward, Alaska. There's that little cylindrical tank, has some pilings in it. But then right around the corner, the first big exhibit that you actually see is this Harbor Bottom exhibit. It's pretty fun. It's an interesting looking exhibit to see because the tank is angled. There's actually a little angle to the front there. Kind of makes things a bit strange. In fact, I think if you look at our camera angle here, I'm standing mostly in front of the line, but you can see right down here, this bottle gets doubled. So anytime we have corners in any of our tanks, it kind of makes things look a little strange. And to talk about this tank, it definitely looks different from the other exhibits that we have here. Just to kind of go around it, right, we have debris in here. We have items you would find in a small boat harbor. So here we've got, if someone had like a tire up as a bumper, or what else we got? We got a little motor down there. You do find those, believe it or not, people lose them off of boats. What else we got in here? Oh, we've got the buoy. So this buoy is pretty fun. It's got a hole in it, and critters do live in that. That's actually something we're going to talk about, is that a lot of this debris, marine debris is a huge problem. But even once things have been in there long enough, life sort of, we're going to go Jurassic Park on this. Life finds a way, right? It actually really takes these things over. You can see this bottle here. These were actually found on dives by our divers. And they brought them in, and they wanted these in an exhibit because, it's glass, it's all right, but it's already been colonized by a coral. That pink stuff that grows, you got it on the rock back there, and then you got it on these bottles here. That's a coralline structure that grows, and they love the bottles. And, there's different things that they can grow on. Like, if you're at a dock that's supported by wood pilings, there are worms that'll burrow into those wood pilings. There's mussels and barnacles that'll grow on them. And in fact, I have a picture, speaking of barnacles, that I took on a beach, not here in Seward, Alaska, a warmer beach down in Florida, back about 2019. I was walking on the beach and just came upon this pair of swim goggles. Who knows how long these goggles were there for, but they had been colonized by, you got some barnacles in there. It looks like maybe some little scallops or mussels. And they just, if there's a surface, these sorts of animals will grow on it. So eventually, debris can become part of the ecosystem, which is strange to think of. And of course, as we talk about things like the Great Garbage Patch and all that, the trash, the debris shouldn't be making it to the ocean. But researchers are kind of interested now that it is there, and sometimes it's there for a very long time, looking at how does it impact the animals, right? Toxins, just different pollutants, how does that impact the animals? But also, how does it interact with the animals in maybe more like habitat ways, right? What sort of animals are making their homes now amongst these floating debris patches like the Great Garbage Patch? So I think what we're going to do here is I actually want to show you what an exhibit here at the SeaLife Center looks like behind the scenes. And we've done a couple videos back behind the scenes before where we have gone back into the avian curatorial area, which is actually, the door to that is right next to the harbor bottom tank here. So we're kind of making our way through the center. But we're going to show you what it looks like back behind, because obviously the public just sees this nice front here. So if you give me just a moment, I'm going to tuck around back behind, and I'll meet you over there with a camera. And as always, if you have any questions while we're doing this program, feel free to type those in. I won't be able to answer them or see them while I'm back behind there, but when I get back out, we'll take some questions. And it is going to be a little noisier back here, unfortunately. All right, so this is actually the back of the same exhibit that we were just looking at. And so you can see it's just open back here. Now some of our exhibits, if they've got larger fish that can really jump out, we've actually got some netting that'll go around those just to make sure no one accidentally jumps out. And for the most part, the fish are calm. But of course, one of the things that happened this past week is the entire western coast of North America got a tsunami advisory. And that was due to, of course, the volcanic explosion down in Tonga. We're still learning just how detrimental that was to the folks that live closer. But even people here, in North America, like 6,000 kilometers away or something, I'm probably vastly undermeasuring that. But even here in Alaska, they heard the volcano when the shockwave got to us, and we did get a little tsunami here, just about a foot or so. But that's one of the things that can make these tanks have fish jump, is if there's an earthquake that we can feel here. So if there is, a lot of times the aquarium department will come around, they'll just kind of check, make sure no one actually got scared out of the tank, basically. But this tank has much smaller critters. I'm going to come get this camera and kind of give you a look down into it, and you'll be able to see, hopefully, a little better. Now, of course, there's water flowing in here. So there's lots of ripples, and you might not get a great view down in there. But you can see we can actually see the acrylic back there. So those are the windows that we were standing in front of just a moment ago. As you can see, just like you can't really view up through the surface from underneath at that angle, you can't see people working back here. The people working back here can't see you either. People are always kind of curious. Now, if we were in the water, if we were down lower, we would be able to see out. Some of those larger habitats that we dive in to clean, we can see people out there, we'll wave at them, play rock, paper, scissors through the window, and that sort of thing. Here we've got some critters up close to the top. It looks like we've got sea urchins, some sea stars. You can see all these pilings here. Another thing we have that does get stuff growing on it is any sort of rope or line. Now, this is a really big issue out there as far as marine debris goes. Ropes and lines are just terrible because things get tangled up in them. So please, if you're ever got a boat down by the dock or something like that, please keep track of your lines. Just make sure there's not too much dangling down in there. But the reality of it is, and this tank is kind of designed to show the reality of it, there's plenty of line down there. And when things aren't getting tangled in it, there is stuff growing on it. We've got different algae, those corals can grow on it. So it does provide yet another substrate. Now, one of the nice things, I'm going to make my way back around front, but one of the nice things about having this open back here on the tank is that we can actually feed the animals much easier. So we have a little loop that will pull up and show a feeding just yesterday. With the open top of the tank, with that open design, they are able to just kind of toss food out and make sure everyone gets some food. All right, hopefully everyone can hear me again, but let's see what we've got here for the feeding. You can see just our two aquarists here, and they'll kind of just toss food out. They do look around, you know, they're seeing, is there anywhere that we haven't gotten food? Is there anyone we need to get food to? And of course, lots of animals in here can swim around. You know, we've got different fish. There's some animals that are more, I don't know, bottom dwellers though. And so they tend to kind of just catch what ends up making its way down to them. I think we'll actually see that. We've got like a little prawn picking away at some squid. But this was just yesterday, and in a little bit I'll actually show you exactly what they were feeding them. Now the herring, interestingly enough, those came from Resurrection Bay. Not just Resurrection Bay, they came from our small boat harbor. So they were actually found in a harbor, and of course now we have them in our harbor bottom exhibit. And there you can see kind of what it looks like for the swimmers. They'll actually get up there, even flatfish, there was one at the beginning, but little bottom dwellers, like this snake prickleback, who we'll talk about in just a bit, they kind of just get whatever gets down to them. And the same thing for this spot prawn, right? They don't really get up into the water column and chase things around. All right. Well, looks like maybe we have a couple little questions out there. Laura's running the computer today, so I'll see if we have any questions from them.
Yes, we actually have a text from somebody that may have seen your diving program at the beginning of all these virtual visits. Did you dive during the Polar Bear Plunge?
Oh, so the Polar Bear Plunge itself is people just jumping in, but I have been a diver in the past. This year, no, it was organized through a different group. But in years past, so this is our camera, we're going to actually explore that tank here in a moment, but let me move that. In years past, I have been a sort of a rescue, just sort of watch diver for the Polar Bear Plunge because, you know, it's really cold water. You got people showing up in who knows what, like sometimes they're in costumes. We've had people show up in like those horse masks and jump, and it's just like, well, that's your choice. But we're there to just kind of make sure people stay safe. So I don't want to jump in. First of all, small boat harbor, not like the cleanest water. As you can see, there's plenty of stuff in there. But secondly, as a diver, I get that nice dry suit. I get to kind of just float there in the water. I'll pump a little air in because I don't have to go down, so I can just kind of float around. And really our big thing at the end, you know, assumedly no one gets hurt. Hopefully no one gets hurt. But afterwards, someone always drops something. There'll be, you know, people drop cameras, or one year someone lost their glasses. They jumped in their glasses, lost those. So at the end of the jump, the divers go down and kind of just do a little sweep so that hopefully we don't add more debris to the small boat harbor. So let's actually explore this a bit, and I can take more questions as we're doing that. But I'm going to take this camera that we were just back behind the scenes with, and let's see what we can find in our exhibit. All right, so right away you can see, of course, the herring are kind of just everywhere, and they cruise around. We've actually got a clip of a nice close-up of the herring. I really like them because they're very shiny. The light's not really catching them too much here, but hopefully we can pull up our herring clip here. I love how shiny they are, and they have just such goofy little mouths. They're really a fun fish, and they are more of a schooling fish, which of course schooling is somewhat of a defensive behavior. So when we're looking in this tank right now, they're not really schooled up or anything like that. They're pretty lazy. They're feeling pretty comfortable. It looks like we might have lost our feed. Give us just a moment there. Ah, perfect. So we're back to the camera here. But you can see those herring just kind of cruise around. They're pretty relaxed in here. We don't really put any predators in for them or anything like that. But I have been here right when the tank lights turn on in the morning, and a lot of times they will all be grouped together. I think it kind of gets dark, and they're like, oh, this is when the scary things might show up, and they all sort of group together in a little school. So we do see some schooling behavior. I want to get a shot of those bottles down there because we did talk about them. So the bottles, of course, have that coral growing on them, which is really fun to see. It makes them very pretty, but things will also live in the bottles. Now, in here we don't have any octopus, but bottles are kind of famous for being little octopus homes out in the wild because, of course, octopus can squeeze their way through that narrow neck and live in that nice roomy interior and just be protected, you know, it's sort of a shell for an otherwise shellless animal. Looks like we've got another question here.
Maggie, who's 5 years old, is asking,
Ooh, well, I did say we were going to show the food. You're right. Let's actually cut on over to our document camera here. We'll leave our live cam. What do we feed the fish? Well, I've got some food from yesterday. Oh, you get like weird fancy light today for this. But we have a variety. And this is an interesting tank because you got a bunch of animals with different mouth sizes. So this right here, we got a piece of squid. And this is actually like if you ever ordered calamari and it comes in a nice little ring, that's what we've got here. We've got a ring. But right in the middle, it looks like you can maybe see it a little bit on the camera. There's like a gel there. And those are actually eggs. So this was from a female squid that was food prepped for this tank. And those eggs are just another thing that'll get eaten in there. But not everyone can eat a big chunk of squid like that. So we have smaller bits. We've got some arms and tentacles over there. And then even those will get chopped up into smaller bits. Another small food item that we feed are these right over here, which are little teeny tiny shrimp, little krill. And we'll feed those out to the animals in there as well. And these are all the things that you saw getting tossed in there in that footage we had earlier from yesterday's feeding. And in fact, the shrimp was kind of cruising around with one of these rings of squid working on that. Another question?
Yeah. Doreen is wondering how many fish do we have?
Oh, here at the center? Oh my gosh. I feel like we get this so frequently. I feel like I probably give a slightly different answer. We do have, first of all, as far as just the animals go, I mean, within just fish, easily hundreds. It wouldn't surprise me if we're close on to 1,000 or so. But if you're including just all of the aquarium animals, right, like the shrimp and stuff in here, yeah, including the invertebrates, we do get up to, thousands of animals here at the center. I feel like we just got an inventory not too long ago. Does anyone here at the camera know? No? No one remembers our inventory, but we do take inventory of sort of what we have here at the center. If we can get a solid number on that, I'll actually toss that down in the comments a little bit later. I can check that out. Let's cut on back to our live camera here. Or not our document camera, but see what we got. See if anyone's in the buoy today. So I did mention, it doesn't look like anyone's in there. We do actually have fish that like to hang out in there, and one of them is called the decorated warbonnet. I was hoping they'd be peeking out. But they're not in there today. We can show a picture of a decorated warbonnet we've got here instead. This one is actually in the tank just next door. And as you can see, we've got like some plumbing in that tank that's exposed so they can kind of crawl down in there. More of like a harbor, a bottom adjacent tank. The decorated warbonnet, you can see how it gets its name. It is a very fancy fish. It's also a very long fish. If you take a look at this picture here, this was provided by Joel Satori, who has the excellent Photo Arc project. You can check it out at photoarc.com. But basically, he came here and he took a bunch of pictures of our critters, and we were able to use some of those for this program. So thank you always, Joel Satori. But you can see that fish is quite long. And so the decorated warbonnet is actually a type of fish related to pricklebacks, or it is a prickleback. And we actually have another prickleback in this tank. I can find that on the live camera. So we'll cut on through. And let's find one of these snake pricklebacks. Oh, we've got one right there. Zoom on in. Now, this is another one of those critters that here at the SeaLife Center, it has a misnomer. Right? It is not obviously a snake. There are, sea snakes, that sort of thing. But here at the snake pricklebacks, they are indeed not snakes. But pricklebacks are kind of these longer fish. And one of the things about many pricklebacks is they can curl themselves up. But if we pull up the footage, I've got some footage of pricklebacks kind of swimming around. We can pull that up. You can see they are a longer fish. They usually stay pretty straight. One of the things that's notable about our pricklebacks is that they actually can't curl up too much. They can get up and swim, but for the most part, they just hang out down on the bottom, like you see here. And we've got actually some pictures of our snake pricklebacks we can pull up, again, from Joel Satori's Photo Arc project. I love these photos. So you can see they can get a little bit of curvature to them, but a lot of pricklebacks will actually curl themselves down around and under and in between rocks. And the snake prickleback likes to hang out a lot more in eel grasses. It'll just kind of be down in little grassy bottoms or harbor bottoms. And here you got a close-up of that face. And I love that they kind of just stand up on their front fins there. And they'll sort of scoot around a little bit like that. But that's, you know, one of the fish here that confuses a lot of people because, again, called a snake prickleback. We've had people go, oh, is that a sea snake? They are not. They are a fish. They're a prickleback. But people also go, is it an eel, right? Any long, squirmy fish you got, is it an eel? And the same thing for, of course, the decorated warbonnet we saw earlier. Is that an eel? No, neither of those are eels. And we actually don't have any true eels here. But Alaska does have true eels in these deep water avocet snipe eels, which just have weird little noodle lips. You should look up an avocet snipe eel. Looks like we got a question.
We have 2 questions, and hopefully they'll kind of come together. 3 questions, actually. Are the tanks at the Alaska SeaLife Center specially constructed to withstand earthquakes? And what is the largest earthquake that you've had since the ASLC?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Are the tanks specially constructed? Well, so the building, can we show one of those? I'm actually looking. I'm going to go back over here with the live camera, so come along with me. On the floor here, so the whole building is constructed with earthquakes in mind. On the floor here is a rubber strip, or a double rubber strip, and you can actually see that this goes up the wall here, and you'll find several of these around the building. There's a couple places where these rubber strips just divide the building, and those are in part for earthquakes. So if an earthquake happens, the whole floor doesn't get kind of compressed on itself, but instead these little strips can take the buckling. And hopefully lessen the movement of the building. One of the things we have seen, you know, we haven't had any of the tanks just like break from an earthquake, but some of the larger, longer earthquakes, we'll get some sloshing from them. That's one of the things we will see. So, you know, we don't have tanks that just have like shattered or anything or have been broken that I'm aware of, but we do get them sloshing, and a lot of times we'll see footage on the cameras afterwards of them sloshing around. The biggest earthquake we had, gosh, there was one a couple years back. In 20, well, maybe. I wasn't here in 2012, so I couldn't tell you about the big one there. But in 2016 and 2018, there were 2 like in winter that we had that were pretty good. They rocked us around a bit. We probably had to evacuate on up for tsunami warnings, but nothing bad, fortunately. The largest earthquake, of course, here was the 1964 earthquake, which is before the SeaLife Center came to be.
So with these earthquakes, do any of the fish like jump out of the exhibits in their homes?
Yeah, so I did mention, let me get back in there. We had our live camera there. So with the earthquakes, do the fish jump out? I mentioned that some, and just make sure no one's like out on the ground, you know, out of the water. So we will double check on all that whenever one happens. Any other questions there?
So do any of the animals in these like mixed exhibits eat each other?
Ooh, do the animals eat each other? So that's one of the things we try to avoid, right? We always try to make sure that we're not putting predator and prey in together in these tanks. Now, of course, that being said, one of the easiest ways to do this is just make sure everyone is well fed, right? One of the things that could happen is that some of the sea stars in here do get pretty predatory as far as like actually actively going after things. And so especially in our touch tank that we've shown before, we kind of separate the big ones out. But as long as we're keeping everyone pretty well fed, no one's like, my neighbors are looking pretty delicious right now. So we do try to just keep things that would eat each other not in the same tank. And then we also just make sure everyone is getting well fed. Looks like another question here coming up.
With this, how do you make sure that everyone has enough food so they don't have to go after each other?
All right. So we can actually pull up that feeding loop again from yesterday. And you can see, right, we're just kind of tossing food in. It seems pretty disorganized, right? Like just huck food in there and hope they get it. And this is called broadcast feeding or scatter feeding, I've heard it called as well sometimes. But basically, you're just kind of hucking food out there, and the fish will go after it. And then some of it makes it down to the bottom, right? That's the thing, is you want to toss food in, and as long as the swimming fish are interested in the food, they're still hungry, right? So they'll kind of get a little frantic right when the food gets in there. You'll see them pick at it. And then they get a little slower. They get a little bit like, I just ate. I don't need more. But then you still want a little bit more food. That way enough sinks down to the bottom for things like our shrimp that were down there, or some of our flatfish hang out down there. We've got a crab in here. I've actually been looking for him. We've got a helmet crab in here that creeps around on the bottom. But you need enough food to get down to them. So we kind of have that figured out as far as how much to put in so everyone gets fed. But one thing we have had to do sometimes is target feeding, which is the aquarium department actually has a little pole that they can put food on the tip of the pole and direct that pole directly down to an animal that otherwise might be, outcompeted. If there's like really fast fish around and there's one kind of like shy, slow fish, we got to hand feed them or pole feed them. Anemones also sometimes will get fed that way. If there's just like one in a tank that you're not sure if food got to it, you might direct a little bit over there to it. So we do make sure everyone gets enough food, but there's different strategies, right? The swimmers, the crawlers, and the ones that just don't move that much at all. Got to make sure they all get fed.
So after you have broadcasted this feed, what happens to the leftover food, and how do you clean these types of things?
Ooh, what happens to leftovers, and how do we clean the tanks? Well, let's see if we can find any leftovers from yesterday. Let's cut on over to our little mobile cam here, and let's see. I know they got fed the squid, so the squid's going to be the easiest thing to find if we can find any leftovers. I'm not seeing any. There's something back on that rock there that was making me think maybe that was a little bit of squid, but it doesn't look like we got a ton of leftovers. So the leftovers are really the least of our concerns because these animals, a lot of them are scavengers. Things like the sea stars, things like the spot prawns, those shrimp. They will just crawl around or cruise around on the bottom, and they'll find any bits that are left. Sometimes they can like chemically smell it in the water, or they just sort of go out and explore and find it, and so the leftovers get eaten. But how do we clean the tank? That is another thing entirely. Now, we had an episode pretty early on about getting in some of our larger tanks and diving in them and cleaning them that way. This tank is a little small for us to do that. So what we will do is we can siphon these tanks, and that involves kind of getting a long tube down there, a long flexible tube, and you get a little siphon suction going, and you can kind of vacuum up the bottom. We don't have to do that a lot in this tank, just because, again, we do have like the little shrimp that cruise around. Some of our other tanks don't have a lot of bottom feeders, so we will siphon them more actively. The other thing, of course, is things will grow on the acrylic, and I don't see anyone even crawling on the acrylic today, but as we mentioned, right, like any hard surface in there will get colonized, and those corals that take over the rocks and the buoy and the glass, they will happily grow on the acrylic. And actually, I just found a little bit. And I found our helmet crab. You're not going to be able to see him very well. Helmet crab's hiding right down there. And he's just peeking up over the edge. But right here, there's just a little bit of that coral at the very bottom. And that's honestly just a hard area to get to. So one of the things we'll do is we can scrub the window. We basically have like a really long-handled scrubber. Kind of looks like a Swiffer, if you know what I'm talking about. But a really long-handled little scrubber that they'll go and scrub the window with. And that's a two-person job sometimes, because if there's a little bit of schmutz growing on the window, it's kind of difficult to see from above, because you can remember that view that we had when we were behind the scenes. But even though you can't see through the acrylic, you can't see a person standing here, if I take a flashlight and I hold it directly up to the acrylic, someone on the other side can see where that flashlight is. So a two-person team can have one person out here with a flashlight highlighting where stuff is on the glass, and the other person up above can see where that flashlight's shining and go scrub that area specifically. Now, every once in a while, we'll drain these tanks out just a bit and really get in there and do a deep cleaning. But for the most part, just that scrubbing and the occasional siphoning when it's needed really gets these tanks pretty well cleaned.
Okay, from Margaret, I think you said the water in the bay is not too clean. What type of pollutants are there, and where do they come from?
Oh, so the water in the bay, is pretty standard seawater. I think you're talking about when I was like the harbor bottom. I don't want to just jump in the harbor because you never know if there's been, any sort of like fish cleaned there. It's pretty grody. Like, we have a lot of fishing business here, which is fine. And of course, if any little fish guts get washed in the water, things will of course eat those, but I don't necessarily want to be jumping in the small boat harbor right there. But as far as water contaminants go, here in Alaska, we are worried about oil spills is one of our big ones. And every year there are little oil spills, but of course the famous one around here is the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill. which happen across Prince William Sound in Valdez. But even here in Resurrection Bay, oil did make it to our waters. And on some beaches, if you go out into areas of Prince William Sound or elsewhere nearby and dig down into the sand, if you dig deep enough, you can still find oil that has seeped down in that sand. So there are contaminants around. One of the things the SeaLife Center does is we actually do have staff that are trained here, and we have staff that train people at other facilities that if there were another terrible oil spill or some other contaminant spill, we would be able to better respond to that. So people are trained up in HAZWOPER is one of the things we train, which is basically dealing with those hazardous waste situations. Another question?
So it's about 11:30, so we have a couple.
Oh, perfect,
to
yeah.
wrap up. So do the aquarium lights, or do the lights have any effect on the animals in the aquarium?
That's a great question. The lights, do they impact our animals? Well, they do, but if we left them on all night, that wouldn't be ideal, right? Because the fish are like, oh, it's too bright. So what we actually do is these lights are on timers. And they are on timers to basically correspond with the sunsets and sunrises around here so that they're only really getting light when they would naturally be getting light. And some of our tanks have dimmer lights, some of our tanks have brighter lights based on just like the depth. This isn't that deep of a tank, so this is a little brighter lit, but we've got one downstairs that's a little darker. So we do try to accommodate the natural lighting that these animals would be seeing. And we are after the new year, we're after winter solstice, and so each day we're getting more sunlight now. So the timers are going to have to change, and pretty soon the lights will be on for long periods of time. But again, the natural periods of time. And it's not just our fish that are affected by the lights. Even our mammals and birds can be impacted by our lighting here. So we always have to be careful and just try to make sure they get as natural lighting as possible. Look like maybe one more question, then we'll wrap on up here.
Yeah, Connie was wondering, will these be published for later viewing?
Oh, these videos, will they be published? Our virtual visits are going to stay right here on YouTube. So you can actually find a playlist on our channel, not only for our virtual visits, but if you got maybe a younger audience member there, a younger visitor, we also have our virtual small fry program, which is great as well. And so these are being broadcast live. Now, every week we're doing the virtual visits on Wednesday at 11 a.m. here in Alaska. But they do stay up on YouTube afterwards. So if if you're like, wow, this has been cool, I want to show my friends or my family, or maybe you got a class or something, they will be here on our YouTube channel. And we'll be doing these pretty much all throughout the school year. And then we're going to have little things just kind of all year round. But thanks to Royal Caribbean Group, we're actually able to make these free. And so with that, I will thank our sponsor, Royal Caribbean Group. Just toss a little shout out to them again, because I love that we can just get out there and make something like this for the public that maybe can't come visit us, or maybe you're like, oh, this isn't the best time to travel to Alaska. And so with Royal Caribbean Group's help, we're able to make sure everyone can visit the SeaLife Center, even if it's just virtually with us. It looked like maybe there was one last minute question. Is that what the signaling was, or am I getting rushed off stage here? Let's see.
Not necessarily connected to Harbor Bottom.
Okay.
What is our most recent rescue that we've had at the center?
Most recent rescue. So we have had some birds come in through the winter, but we actually did a program on our most recent mammals that came in. Our critters, what was it? It was 11th and 12th harbor seals. But we did have a large bird. We had an albatross come on in actually through our rehab program over the winter. Unfortunately, that albatross did not manage to make it through rehab, but if you want to see a little bit more about the rehab process, we do actually have a two-part virtual visit where we look at some harbor seals we treated, and actually maybe we can look at their release, what a successful release looks like on those animals. So it is kind of towards the end of our program here. Again, I want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in. I love that we can bring you here to the SeaLife Center, even in 2022. As unknown as it is, as young a year as it is, we're excited to be doing these virtual visits. Thanks to Royal Caribbean Group, and I hope I'll see you in our future episodes. So long.